Some mountains are not dangerous because of height or weather. They are dangerous because crossing them is forbidden. Around the world, there are peaks protected by law, by belief, or by force. People are warned not to approach. Some ignore the warning. Others disappear before they can turn back. These places are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to remain untouched. And when someone tries to climb anyway, the consequences are permanent. Lock whatever can be locked. Step away from distractions, because after this video, you will never see mountains the same way again. The mountain no one is allowed to touch. Mount Kailash rises from the Tibetan plateau with a shape that immediately feels deliberate. Its slopes are steep but symmetrical. Its summit appears unfinished, almost cut flat, as if something was never meant to continue upward. From a purely geological perspective, it does not present the extreme challenges seen in other Himalayan peaks. Climbers with sufficient experience and equipment could theoretically ascend it, and that is precisely what makes its silence disturbing. For centuries, this mountain has been declared off-limits. Not discouraged, not regulated. Forbidden. The prohibition does not originate from a single culture or authority. It comes from several belief systems that emerged independently and still converge on the same conclusion. Mount Kailash must not be climbed. In Hindu tradition, it is described as the residence of Shiva, a place where the boundary between the physical and the divine collapses. In Buddhism, it is associated with Demchok, representing supreme bliss and cosmic balance. Jain texts identify the mountain as the site where their first spiritual teacher achieved liberation. In the Boon tradition, which predates Buddhism in the region, Kailash is the central pillar of existence, the point around which the world turns. These traditions disagree on many things. On this they do not. Pilgrims are permitted to approach the mountain, but only to a certain extent. They walk a ritual path that circles its base. The journey is slow, deliberate, and often physically exhausting. Some complete the circuit in silence. Others perform full-body prostrations with every step. The act is not symbolic tourism, it is submission. The mountain is not there to be conquered, it is there to be acknowledged. The rule is absolute. The summit is not to be touched. In the modern era, this spiritual boundary became a legal one. Authorities in the region do not issue climbing permits for Mount Kailash. There are no approved routes, no sanctioned expeditions, no rescue protocols. Any attempt to climb it would be considered a serious violation, carrying consequences that extend beyond standard legal penalties. Officials have repeatedly stated that the ban exists to preserve cultural and religious integrity. That explanation is given calmly, firmly, without room for discussion. Yet the mountain continues to attract attention. Within mountaineering circles, there are quiet references to failed attempts. Not public expeditions, but individuals or small groups who believe the prohibition was symbolic rather than enforced. Their accounts, when they exist at all, are incomplete. Journals that end mid-sentence, itineraries that were never finished, stories passed second-hand, always without names. A pattern emerges across these fragments. Those who claim to have approached the upper slopes rarely describe physical danger. Instead, they mention confusion, loss of orientation despite clear visibility, sudden equipment malfunctions with no identifiable cause, a pervasive sense that continuing upward was not just risky, but wrong. Several accounts describe climbers turning back without being able to explain the decision, only that the urge to leave was overwhelming. No confirmed remains have ever been recovered from the upper reaches of the mountain. No abandoned camps, no fixed ropes, no summit markers. In a world saturated with documentation, where even the most remote ascents are recorded and shared, Mount Kailash remains conspicuously absent. It is visible from all sides, accessible by road, surrounded by pilgrims, and yet its summit exists outside human history. The mountain stands untouched, not because it cannot be climbed, but because something, whether belief, authority, or fear, has ensured that it never will be. And the longer that silence remains unbroken, the heavier it becomes. The rock that watched people leave changed. Uluru dominates the desert without rising aggressively. It does not threaten the horizon, it absorbs it. For thousands of years, the Anangu people have treated this monolith not as scenery, but as a living presence tied directly to law, memory, and consequence. Every fissure, every curve, every shadow on its surface is connected to stories that are not metaphorical. They are instructional. They explain how to live, where not to go, and what happens when boundaries are crossed. For outsiders, Uluru was long treated differently. It became an attraction, a challenge, a photograph. Visitors climbed it not because they needed to, but because they could. and for decades they were warned. Signs asked politely, then firmly, then repeatedly. The message never changed. This place is not meant to be climbed. Most ignored it. What followed was not superstition, it was record-keeping. Rescue operations became common. Visitors underestimated the heat, the exposure, the surface temperature of the rock itself. People slipped. Some fell. Others became disoriented and could not descend. Deaths occurred. Bodies were recovered under conditions that should not have happened on a climb described as simple. Rangers documented each incident. The list grew quietly. Alongside the physical danger, something else accumulated. Anangu elders spoke publicly about unease, about imbalance, about the weight carried by the rock when it is treated as an object instead of a presence. They described Uluru as a place that remembers, not emotionally, functionally. When rules tied to the land are broken, consequences do not arrive as punishment. They arrive as disorder. Eventually, the requests stopped being requests. In the year 2019, climbing Uluru was formally banned. The decision was not framed as political. It was framed as corrective. The route was closed. Chains were removed. Access points were dismantled. The message was final. The climb was over. What happened next was unexpected. Visitors continued to arrive, but many reported a different experience, a tension that had not been there before. People spoke of feeling watched while standing at the base. Others described a sudden urge to leave the area sooner than planned. Rangers noted an increase in visitors asking unusual questions, not about the ban, but about stories they had heard. Stories of people who climbed before the closure and later contacted park officials asking how to return items they had taken. Small stones, grains of sand, pieces of the rock. Park records confirm a steady flow of mailed packages from around the world. Inside are fragments taken from Uluru decades earlier. Included are letters. The tone is consistent. People describe illness, job loss, accidents, a persistent sense that something is wrong. They ask if returning the object will help. No one officially answers that question. The Anangu do not celebrate the ban. They describe it as necessary. Uluru remains where it has always been, but something changed when the climbing stopped. The rock is quieter now, heavier, less accommodating. It still allows people to stand near it, to observe, to listen. But the rule is clear. Some places are not dangerous because they resist you. They are dangerous because they remember when you ignore them. The mountain the state does not let you approach. Mount Paektu is not just a mountain. It is a controlled symbol. Rising on the border between North Korea and China, this dormant volcano is embedded so deeply into the identity of the North Korean state that separating geography from ideology becomes impossible. The mountain appears in propaganda, textbooks, murals, and speeches. It is described not merely as sacred, but as foundational. According to the official narrative, it is the birthplace of the nation's revolutionary spirit. Access to Mount Paektu exists, but only in a carefully managed form. Select visitors are escorted to approved viewpoints. Cameras are allowed only in specific directions. Guides decide when people stop, when they move, and what questions are answered. Deviation is not tolerated. The mountain is present but never fully accessible. Large areas surrounding it are heavily restricted. Roads disappear without explanation. Maps lose detail. Military checkpoints appear where terrain alone would not justify them. Foreigners are explicitly forbidden from entering certain zones, and even local citizens require special authorization. The reasoning given is always vague. Environmental protection, safety, national heritage. None of those explanations fully account for the level of control. The mountain itself is geologically unstable. Beneath its surface is a massive magma chamber. Scientists outside the country have expressed concern about the potential for future activity. Seismic monitoring is limited and data is tightly controlled. Independent research is not permitted. The interior of the mountain is effectively sealed from external scrutiny. There are persistent rumors of facilities built into the surrounding terrain. Tunnels, observation posts, storage sites. These claims are never acknowledged, never denied. Satellite imagery reveals anomalies, but interpretation is speculative. What is clear is that Mount Paektu is treated less like a natural landmark and more like a strategic asset. Defectors have provided fragmented accounts. Some describe forced labor projects in the region. Others mention restricted convoys traveling at night. A few claim that entire villages were relocated without explanation. These testimonies are inconsistent in detail but aligned in tone. The mountain is not a place people ascend voluntarily. Even within official narratives, something feels restrained. Celebrations of the mountain focus on symbolism, not exploration. There are no accounts of scientific ascent, no public documentation of extended study at the summit. The crater lake, one of the deepest in the world, is presented as an image, not a subject. One detail stands out. Mount Paektu is one of the few places in North Korea where failure is not depicted. Everything associated with it is portrayed as perfect, pure, and unquestionable. That absence is unusual. In a system built on control, silence often indicates vulnerability. Visitors who have been allowed near the mountain describe an atmosphere that feels tense rather than reverent. Guards remain close. Conversations are monitored. There is a constant sense of being observed, not for safety, but for compliance. The mountain is there, massive and visible, yet unreachable in any meaningful way. You are allowed to look. You are not allowed to linger. Mount Paektu remains elevated not only by altitude, but by restriction. Its summit exists within a border that cannot be crossed without permission, and permission is rarely granted. Not because the mountain is dangerous, but because what lies beneath it, whether physical or symbolic, is something the state refuses to risk exposing. The highest mountain humanity was told not to climb. Gangkhar Puensum rises quietly from the eastern Himalayas, higher than any mountain on Earth that has never been climbed. Its height alone would normally attract the attention of elite mountaineers, national expeditions, and commercial sponsors. Instead, it attracts something else: silence. There are no summit photographs, no flags, no fixed ropes, no human record of arrival at the top. This absence is not the result of failure. It is the result of refusal. For generations, the people of Bhutan have viewed mountains not as obstacles, but as residences. Not metaphorically, spiritually. Peaks are believed to be inhabited by protective deities whose presence maintains balance between the land and those who live on it. Disturbing these spaces is not seen as exploration. It is seen as interference. For a time, this belief existed alongside outside curiosity. In the late 20th century, several international expeditions sought permission to climb Gangkhar Puensum. Requests were submitted, routes were studied from afar, equipment was prepared. None of it mattered. The Bhutanese government denied every attempt. Eventually, the policy became absolute. Climbing mountains above 6,000 meters was formally prohibited. The reason given was respect. Respect for tradition, respect for belief, respect for forces that do not require proof to be acknowledged. Unlike other restricted mountains, Gangkhar Puensum is not guarded by soldiers. There are no fences, no warning signs posted in multiple languages. The restriction is enforced through policy and cultural consensus, not intimidation. That makes it more effective. Those who have approached the mountain describe a strange contradiction. The terrain is accessible. The weather, while harsh, is not uniquely hostile. Technically, the mountain could be climbed. The difficulty is not physical, it is moral. Within mountaineering communities, Gangkhar Puensum occupies an uncomfortable place. It represents a limit not imposed by nature but by choice. Some climbers describe it as unfinished business. Others refuse to discuss it at all. To acknowledge the mountain is to confront the idea that not everything exists for human achievement. There are no confirmed attempts to violate the ban, no dramatic rescues, no official incidents. That absence is part of what makes the mountain unsettling. In a world where rules are often tested simply because they exist, this one remains intact. Satellite images show the peak untouched. Snow patterns remain unbroken year after year. There are no scars from failed routes, no evidence of struggle. The mountain stands as it always has, unchanged by ambition. Local accounts describe Gangkhar Puensum as observant, not hostile, watchful. The belief is not that climbers would be punished immediately, but that imbalance would follow. Crops would fail, weather would shift, something essential would move out of alignment. These consequences are not dramatic. They are gradual, difficult to trace, impossible to reverse. That may be why no one has tried. Gangkhar Puensum does not resist climbers with storms or cliffs. It resists them with agreement. Between government, culture, and belief, the decision has already been made. The mountain will remain unclaimed. Not because humanity lacks the skill to reach the summit, but because for once it chose not to. The mountain that cannot be reached because it does not exist. Mount Meru is not marked on any modern map. There are no coordinates, no satellite images, no elevation data, and yet for thousands of years it has been treated as the most important mountain on Earth, not symbolically, structurally. In ancient Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain cosmology, Mount Meru is described as the center of the universe, the axis around which all existence turns. The sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets are said to orbit it. Entire continents are positioned in relation to its slopes. Heaven rests above it. Other realms exist below it. Reality itself is organized around this single, unreachable peak. Unlike other sacred mountains, Mount Meru was never meant to be visited. Texts describe it as physically unreachable by human beings, not because of distance but because of nature. Its scale is inconsistent. Its proportions change depending on perspective. Some descriptions place it thousands of kilometers high. Others describe it as inverted, extending downward as much as it rises upward. Gold, crystal, fire, and light are used interchangeably to describe its substance. These contradictions are not errors. They are warnings. Ancient scholars debated whether Mount Meru existed on Earth, beyond Earth, or outside physical space entirely. Expeditions were never organized to find it, because searching for it was considered misunderstanding its function. Meru was not lost. It was inaccessible by design. Attempts to locate it geographically have occurred in later centuries. Some associated it with Himalayan peaks. Others proposed symbolic alignments with sacred cities or temples built to mirror its structure. None of these claims persisted. Every attempt to anchor Mount Meru to a physical location eventually collapsed under its own logic. The mountain resists reduction. What makes Mount Meru unsettling is not that it cannot be climbed, but that it cannot even be approached. There is no forbidden border to cross. No guard, no law. The restriction exists internally. The moment one tries to treat it as a destination, it stops functioning as intended. In cosmological texts, those who attempt to ascend Meru without spiritual preparation do not fail dramatically. They simply do not arrive. Time behaves differently. Direction loses meaning. The journey dissolves before it can conclude. There is no summit moment, no return story. In this way, Mount Meru represents a different kind of prohibition. It does not punish trespass. It nullifies it. The mountain exists as a constant reference point that cannot be reached, challenged, or verified. It sits at the center of systems that guided civilizations, moral codes, calendars, and architecture. Entire temples were built as scaled representations of its form. Cities were planned to reflect its geometry, all of it oriented towards something no one expected to ever touch. That expectation matters. Mount Meru enforces a boundary not on movement, but on understanding. It draws a line between what can be experienced and what must remain conceptual. In a series of forbidden mountains defined by law, belief, or force, Meru stands apart. There is no authority preventing access. There is no physical barrier. There is only the certainty that some structures of reality are not meant to be entered. They are meant to remain central, distant, and unreachable. Mount Meru cannot be climbed because it is not a place you arrive at. It is a reminder that not all limits are external. Some are built into the way the world is allowed to make sense. Some mountains are forbidden by law, others by belief, and some by an agreement humanity never voted on, but still obeys. Which of these places unsettled you the most? Not out of curiosity, but discomfort. Write it in the comments. Read what others chose. And if this kind of document stays with you longer than it should, subscribe. Some stories do not end when the video does.